Hi there, my name's Marcel Viera, and I'd like to have a conversation about the differences between a good teacher and a great teacher. And I believe that there are some really observable differences between both teachers. Unfortunately, we have some teachers that will turn up to work and they're kind of waiting just to get to the end of their day. They're kind of just dragging themselves through the end of the day. And this is really different to someone who goes in and uses their job of teaching as a way of achieving fulfillment and as a way of achieving happiness in their world. So we have some distinct differences, and what's really observable as well is that the students are really aware of the differences between the good teachers and the great teachers. So let's have a look at what those differences are. So if we're going to have a look at what makes up or the characteristics of a good teacher, here are some of the things that make up what I've noticed are in a good, solid teacher. The first one is that they tend to be content driven. So what I mean by that is that the focus tends to be on delivering information to their students, and they become quite good at delivering the information. The reason they effectively get through the information is because the focus is on assessment, exams, on finishing off of projects. So there's a lot to be said for helping students complete their tasks, of course, and it's fundamental to the job of teaching. But we tend to have a bit of a focus with the good teachers on what the content is and on preparing students for an assessment, whether that be an exam, whether that be a project, whether that be a task. And finally, the other characteristic of a good teacher, a good solid teacher, is that they tend to be compliant. And what I mean by that is that they're very good at meeting the outcomes that are set by the syllabus, or they're able to meet the requirements of a program, and also, in terms of the registration and so on, they're able to tick off the checklist that's required in order to get through all of the information. So, a good teacher is content driven, tends to have an assessment focus, and is compliant. However, there's a bit of a difference between a good teacher and the great teachers. We can have teachers, and we have this. We have some teachers that are good in the sense that they are able to deliver the content and they help achieve their great results in their students through the assessments and so on, and they're very compliant. But you know what? They're disgruntled, they're worn out, they're unfulfilled, they're unhappy. They sometimes even practically drag themselves to their teaching job. So there's a difference between being a good teacher and being a great teacher. So I'm not saying that these things aren't important, they are. And what you'll see is that a great teacher is a combination of everything that's in a good teacher with the addition of some of these following characteristics. The first one is that they model success. So a great teacher goes far beyond delivering of information to their students and preparing them for exams and being compliant. They model success because they are a fulfilled and happy human being. So they are an example of what it's like to be a successful, what I refer to as a successful human being. But equally as important, they model failure, because part of understanding teaching, or part of getting the best out of our students, which is what great teachers do, is that they also show them this is what an example of success looks like, but also it's an appreciation that in order to get the successes, you need to go through obstacles, you need to go through hurdles, and ultimately you need to fail at doing stuff. So part of their teaching is that they inherently fail in some of the tasks that they do as a way of showing the students that it's okay to fail to achieve what the success is. As a result of that, they've cultivated what we refer to as a growth mindset. So a growth mindset is where you're open to different ideas, you're open to different suggestions, and you're trying different things out. You take risks. When I say risks, I don't mean unnecessary risks. I'm talking about risk with your teaching, with your pedagogy, where you try things out to see if it's going to give you an even better outcome. Really importantly, and this is a big difference between a good teacher and a great teacher is congruent with their values. So a great teacher has identified what is important to them, and then they take actions to ensure that what is important to them remains important, and they do things to make sure that they're looking after that, which includes their well-being, which includes their maintaining a positive mindset with the work that they're doing. And ultimately, this means that a great teacher is fulfilled in their work. So great teachers turn up to work and they love the challenge. They love what they do. They understand that they're doing it as a process of growing. And what ends up happening is that when you have a great teacher in front of a group of students, they get all the content, they get how to get through the assessment, but more importantly, they get an example of what it's like to see a fulfilled, a happy, a well-rounded human being in front of them, and that's what they're really learning. So then that brings up the question, how do we get there? How do I become, how do I move from being a good teacher to becoming a great teacher? Well, there are some key elements. There are some key elements that are really important and that really differentiate the movement from being a good teacher to a great teacher. The first one of these is awareness. Awareness of your values, awareness of understanding what's actually important in your world. So, for so many teachers, they especially if they're not aware of what's really important in their world, they'll just keep on doing what's expected of them, what everyone else asks them to do. They keep giving and giving and giving because they've kind of lost touch with what's really important, or maybe they're aware but they're not actually actively moving towards that. So, really importantly, understanding of our values. It's also awareness of our needs, and it turns out that we have 6 needs. We refer to them as our 6 core needs. The 6 needs, very briefly, are certainty, uncertainty, certainty and uncertainty, I should say. We have significance, we have connection, and we have contribution and growth. So these 6 needs, a great teacher meets those needs resourcefully because they are aware that they are part of the person that they are. And equally as important, they are aware of our universal fears. So all of us have these 3 universal fears, which are the fear of not being good enough, the fear of not being not belonging, and the fear of not being loved. So these 3 fears are really they're in all of us, but the biggest difference is that the good teachers are aware that we have these fears, but they still work with those fears and move through them rather than get caught up and stop growing because of them. So the first key element is awareness. The second key element is self-care. This is so important. And we see teachers tend to have a servant's heart. What I mean by that is that they give and give and give. So during their lunchtime, they give to all the students. Before and after school, they're constantly giving. And they get home and they're still giving to the students by preparing work continuously. And what ends up happening is that they get to a point where they're giving so much that they have nothing left to give to the people that are really important in their world, so their loved ones and their families or their children if they happen to have children. And it goes further than that because what ends up happening is that when they start neglecting their own well-being, what ends up happening is that they start to get disillusioned. They start to get resentful because they're constantly giving and they feel like they're not getting anything back. So something that's really important is an awareness around what's important so that you can look after your own needs, which is what I refer to as self-care. The third key element is what I refer to as leveraging time. So one common one common complaint that comes up amongst teachers is that we just don't have enough time. And unfortunately, I can't create more hours in a day for you. But what we can do as teachers is become very aware, very conscious of where we are using our time. And what's really important is not that the creation of more time, it's the understanding of what our priorities are and putting time towards our priorities. So teachers will sometimes get caught up in doing what I refer to as a low value task, where they spend a huge amount of time in something that doesn't really give them a lot of return on their investment. When you compare this to a teacher, which is what a great teacher does, they still invest time, but they invest time into things that give them high value. So that means that they do this thing once and they get a lot of leverage out of doing that particular task. And what we find in the great teachers is that when they have an awareness of their mindset, of their beliefs, of their values, of their needs, and they're taking steps to look after their needs through the self-care, and they're very conscious of using their time in a productive way where they're leveraging it to get high value out of the time that they invest, they get influence. And this is where the magic happens, because now they've looked after themselves. They're in a far better position to look after the needs of the students, and they're modeling what it's like to be a successful human being daily. Apart from delivering the content, they're also showing what it's like to be a great example of a human being, a happy human being, a fulfilled human being, which is so important in education. So they're able to influence their students, and it goes further than that because they're able to influence their loved ones, their family, their friends, and the people around them as well. And when you combine awareness with self care, with leveraging of time, and you have this high level of influence, then you become a great teacher. And I believe that ultimately every teacher has the capacity to become a great teacher by making a couple of adjustments and having some different awareness and different learnings about some of these areas. To find out more about the Good to Great Teacher course, or to find out, or if you have any questions, please visit my website www.mrviera.com/good to great. Thanks for listening.